Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Barker, co-CEO of the cybersecurity company Sygenta, author of the #1 best-selling book Confident Cybersecurity, and co-author of Cybersecurity ABCs. I've been working on the human side of cybersecurity for over 10 years, and today I'm speaking about stamping out repeat offenders. What is the problem with so-called repeat offenders? Well, we can answer that question in two ways: the straightforward way and the right way. Let's start with the straightforward way. Many people would say that the problem with so-called repeat offenders is repeat incidents, or at least repeat near misses. I know that's the topic of discussion that was in mind when I was approached to give this talk. Most accurately, I often find that the term repeat offender is actually used, in cybersecurity at least, to refer to people who repeatedly click links in phishing simulations. So what do we do about that? That is, of course, a long answer and something I've spoken about many times over the years. Because what we're essentially talking about is influencing security behaviours, no doubt as part of developing a positive and proactive security culture. There is lots to talk about here, and it will ultimately come down to the specifics of the organisation. Perhaps there is a culture of massively prioritising productivity over security, or of sending loads of email at the drop of a hat, in which case your so-called repeat offenders might be people who are overwhelmed with email and tasks. Perhaps people just don't get the issue with phishing emails, in which case you really need to take a critical look at your awareness-raising initiatives, because quite simply they're not doing what you need. Perhaps they're not tailored enough, not often enough, or not explaining the why of security well enough. That's a very common issue that I see with awareness-raising campaigns that tell people what to do, or rather what not to do, but which miss the most crucial point: why. If you want people to change their behaviour, you need to show them why it matters. Now, if we're talking about so-called repeat offenders in terms of phishing simulation clicks, I really want to ask why there is such a focus on phishing simulations, and specifically on clicks in phishing simulations. When it comes to behavioural change, it is far more effective to focus on the behaviours you want, rather than punishing people who repeatedly click in phishing simulations. Try rewarding people who repeatedly report phishing simulation emails and, of course, the real thing. Make some noise about those rewards and why you're doing it. People will always click, but you want people to report more than anything else, right? I also encourage the organisations we work with to take a more nuanced approach to clicks in phishing simulations. How long does it take people to click? Are there certain triggers in a phish which are more effective, more likely to prompt a click than others? Is a certain day of the week or time of day more likely to prompt people to click? My second piece of advice with phishing simulations is not to use them to train people. This is essentially using a test, even, let's be honest, sometimes a trick, to try to positively influence long-term behavioural change. So that's not symbolic of a positive security culture. In fact, it's usually a sign of an us and them security culture, in which people in the organisation may be seen as the dreaded weakest link. Instead, use phishing simulations as one of many metrics to see whether your awareness raising is working. So that's the first way of answering the question, what is the problem with repeat offenders? Now we come to the real answer, the answer that I really want to talk about. And this is the answer that gets to the root of the issue, rather than looking at the symptoms. The problem with repeat offenders is with the term repeat offenders. The true definition of a repeat offender is someone who commits the same sort of crime more than once. So when we call someone a repeat offender in terms of security in an organisation, Are we seriously saying that they have repeatedly committed a crime? Because if so, that goes beyond the security department. While preparing for this talk in October 2021, I searched news stories for the term repeat offenders, and I saw articles on domestic abusers, child abusers, racists, and violent criminals. Do you really want to use the same terminology to label your colleagues? And to be clear here, we are not talking about the occasional malicious insider. We're talking about the majority of folks in an organisation who want to do a good or at least a decent job and who don't want to cause a problem for their employer. I was recently working with a client on a so-called repeat offender issue in their organisation, and they came up with a great analogy that stuck in my mind and evolved in my mind in the days following the conversation. The analogy was a child playing in their room and accidentally knocking over a glass of water. My client's argument was that if it happened once, you wouldn't be annoyed, but if it happened repeatedly, you might expect the child to learn and be more careful. It's a great analogy. For me, it sparked loads of further questions. Rather than expecting the child to learn and be vigilant whilst also playing, couldn't the glass of water simply be placed somewhere else? Could the water go in a drinking cup or in a bottle so that it doesn't spill so easily? Maybe a waterproof mat could be used in the play area so any spills are contained. Obviously, this is an analogy for data security, and that last one a reference to data segmentation, just in case it wasn't clear. Essentially, instead of trying to attribute blame, we could look at the whole system, the whole scenario, and work out, to paraphrase Sidney Dekker, what went wrong rather than who is at fault. That way, we deal with the actual underlying cause rather than, most likely, pointing the finger and just making the problem worse. You might find that the child doesn't stop spilling the water, but they stop telling you about it. I quote Sidney Dekker because his work on just culture is vital here. Dekker's work explores the importance of a restorative just culture, in which the root cause of incidents is explored, rather than a retributive culture in which people are blamed. Because what happens in the latter? Of course, you don't see a decline in incidents, you just see a rise in people hiding incidents, which makes everything worse. What are the most important objectives when we're dealing with influencing behaviours in security? I think we can all agree that we want people to listen to us. We want people to communicate with us. We want people to trust us. And we want to be able to trust people. Probably most importantly, we really, really, really want people to report incidents. So let me ask another question. Why do we hold people to such high standards? What about repeat offending technology? We don't talk about that. Instead of being annoyed with people who repeatedly click links in phishing emails, take a look at the technical solutions you have in place to filter out your phishes, or the awareness-raising training platform that is meant to be helping people be more secure. I've been giving keynotes on the problem with calling people the weakest link in security for most of my 10-year career in security. To begin with, there were only a few of us so vocally going against the tide. Now most people would, I hope, agree that we shouldn't call people the weakest link. And yet we think it's okay to call people repeat offenders? Not only is it dehumanizing, it is actually part of a narrative that makes it harder to engage people in being part of the solution in security. Labeling people as the problem makes them more of a problem. We don't just need to change the words we use, we truly need to change our whole approach to people. We've been talking about a people-centric approach to security for a while, and it's about time we made it happen. The answer is empathy and compassion. That is the answer as a way to tackle so-called repeat offenders in an organisation and as a way to tackle the negative narrative that we have around people in security. Because if we had empathy and compassion in security, it would never occur to us to call people the weakest link or to refer to them as repeat offenders. Why empathy and compassion? Empathy is where we imagine being in the place of the other person. We put ourselves in their shoes. Empathy is emotional and compassion is more cognitive, more focused on the help that we can offer. When it comes to empathy, we feel what the other is feeling. And so empathy alone can drain our own energy and resources. And that's the last thing we need as security professionals. Empathy and compassion combined enables us to tap into feeling what the other is feeling, but with an authentic drive to take action to help. So the combination of the two is better for us and better for the other person and the outcome overall. Of course, if people are repeatedly, willfully ignoring security advice and either being malicious or willfully negligent, as I said earlier, that needs dealing with, and it goes beyond being just a security problem into an HR or a people management problem. But maybe this is a cultural issue. Most people want to be secure. Most people want to do a good job, or at least not a bad job. At Sygenta, our cybersecurity culture assessments of organisations consistently find patterns in which security values and awareness are high in organisations, but perceptions and behaviours are usually further behind. And where people are consistently engaging in weak security behaviours, it usually is due to one of three common issues. Number one is perceptions of security as a blocker, the department of no. Behind this is generally a failure to explain the why of security controls or changes in controls. Number two is perceptions of security not being a priority in the organisation. For example, an organisation that values productivity so much more highly over security, and that will usually be led from the top. And finally, it comes down to perceptions of a retributive culture. So people don't report incidents, as opposed to a restorative just culture where people know that asking questions about security, reporting incidents, flagging issues will lead to an investigation of what went wrong or what's going wrong to stop it happening again, rather than who is to blame to punish people. And do you know what language is at the heart of a retributive culture, the kind of culture that drives weaker security behaviours? Yep, you've got it. Repeat offenders.